Okay, so as we know, a lot of times Whoopi does have some really bad takes, and I think I think that this is one of them. But, the purpose of me making this video is not to be necessarily like dragging Whoopi, even though her comments do annoy me. The purpose of this is to encourage, Gen Z millennials who often hear this kind of messaging where y'all just, the reason why y'all having a hard time, y'all just lazy, y'all don't want to work, y'all don't do this, y'all don't do that. So I just wanted to be like a counter to that. Like, y'all aren't, like, we're not, like, young people are not lazy. We see what's happening, and us calling it out is not complaining. It's just saying, like, the world can be better than what it is. Like, the world can be better than what it is right now. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that. All right, so it was this whole segment on The View that a lot of social media was talking about. And they basically were the panel was just discussing, okay, millennials and Gen Z, they're having a hard time adulting or whatever. They're not having kids. They're not buying homes. And they just wanted to get into, okay, why that is. So to start out the conversation, Whoopi was reading off the teleprompter, reading the blurb to start the entire discussion off. And she was listing facts, and it's almost like she was making up her face while she was listing these facts. And from then, I immediately knew that I was not going to like her take on the topic, because I'm like, why are you making up your face while you saying this? Listen, this is what she said. Millennials and Gen Z have a much different view of the American dream than past generations. Data shows that inflation, student debt, and limited room for advancement in the workplace have made young people feel like milestones like buying a home, starting a family, excelling within the corporate structure are out of reach. Does every generation feel this way at some point? And then that was a question, I guess. And Whoopi was just like, well, yes, I say yes. And then what do you think? She handed it over to the other panelists. And the other panelists kind of say, well, yeah, it makes sense for Gen Z and millennials to feel the way they do about having kids and starting a family because of how expensive things are, because of the financial crisis, because of the housing crisis, all this stuff. It makes sense for people to stop and think, can I really handle this? Can this really happen? Is this realistic? And this host here essentially said, there are kids who grew up getting beat. There are kids who are getting abused and neglected. And so the fact that millennials are taking the time out to think about this decision about having kids, is a very good thing, because having kids, the expenses of that, the emotional labor of that, of course, the labor in general, having kids is not a decision that's just best made on a whim or, without any thought or preparation. It's kind of the essential gist of what she was saying. So all of these hosts were just like, yeah, it makes sense for people to stop and think, like, is this actually feasible, right? The one thing that these hosts kind of kept repeating that was kind of iffy to me was, she was like, okay, y'all can just freeze your eggs or whatever, because you might want to have kids later. But realistically, if we're talking about it's expensive for people to have kids, it's like, realistically, that's not as possible for most everyday citizens, because it costs tens and tens of thousands of dollars to do sometimes. So if they had that kind of money, they'd probably just, and money was the only barrier, they'd probably just have the kid, you see what I'm saying? But that was the only iffy thing that they were saying to me. But besides that, most of the hosts had some kind of empathy there when talking about why millennials don't want to have kids and why most young people, Gen Z or whatever, see certain things as completely unattainable at this point. But not Whoopi, okay? Not Whoopi. She said that every generation comes and wants to do better than their parents did. But I'm sorry, if you only want to work 4 hours, it's going to be harder for you to get a house. I always find it interesting because she works like, what, $60 million or something? I always find it interesting that like people who are more out of touch with the way that like everyday kind of finances go, like working jobs, like hourly jobs or whatever, these kind of jobs that y'all talk about, if you only want to work 4 hours, like the people who do not have to face the, these kinds of financial hardships or decisions or anything like that will be the first ones preaching about, oh, you got to get preaching about jobs. She's like, girl, what are you talking about? It's also crazy to me that she even said that in the first place, because I'm just like, a lot of millennials I know are working, okay, multiple jobs, like just trying to make ends meet. And if they are not employed traditionally, they got 5 and 6 gigs that they're doing at the same time. If they're freelancing, they stress the hell out trying to make something shake. Like, it's just like the people, millennials, whatever, young people, they doing shit. So to sit up here and say, oh, well, you only want to work 4 hours. No, like the idea that young people are lazy is so wild to me, because the problem is that we're working, people are working. The problem is that people are working and it don't be meaning shit because of the economy, inflation, housing crisis, high-ass rents, student loan debt, multitude of other things. The average cost of a home in 1985, when Whoopi was 30 years old, was around $80,000. The average, and that was, $80,000. The average cost of a home in 2023 is around $400,000. So, and that's just homes, okay? So it's like people are working more and more and more, but inflation is getting crazy as hell. Like I said, housing is crazy. The economy is crazy as hell. So you're working more, trying to make more coin, but still not able to keep up with the prices of what's going on. Less food is on the table. You see what I'm saying? And I think sometimes people view younger people's like ideas about the future, ideas about the world as, oh, y'all just want to just sit your ass down and not do anything. And it's just like, no, we're looking at the world and seeing that it's inhumane. The way in which work is approached in this fucking world, in this country, is inhumane. It fucks with people's mental health. So us pointing that shit out is not us saying, oh, we don't want to do anything ever at all, ever again. That's not what we're saying. But we're saying that the way that things are working right now is inhumane. It destroys people's mental health. It work-life balance be all fucked up. And then on top of that, you don't even, after sacrificing so much of yourself, you don't even make enough coin a lot of times to keep up with these high-ass rents. It's just, people be one paycheck away from disaster, one missed paycheck away from disaster. So instead of acknowledging that and looking at what these young people are saying, because like I said, you're sitting on they said your net worth is $60 fucking million or some shit like that. So instead of looking at what these young people are saying, even if you don't fully understand what's going on, you know what I mean? Instead of saying, hey, obviously something is bothering y'all. I may not understand it fully because I come from a different generation, or I don't have my finger on the pulse of things like that. But I'm just hearing what y'all saying. Obviously something is wrong, so let's work together to fix it. Instead of saying that, she said this: we busted our behinds. This is what she talked, like she said, her generation. We busted our behinds. We had to bust our behinds because we didn't have the option of going back. And I think she's saying that she didn't have the option, or they didn't have the option of going back to their parents' house or some shit like that. I'm just like, did you? But I mean, that's what she's saying. So in other words, it's like, so since we had to deal with shitty things, you know what I mean? I don't like that some older people say, since I went through this bullshit when I was so young, y'all gonna have to go through that shit too. And when y'all going through it, make sure you shut the hell up, just like I felt like I had to. Like, instead of coming over here and protesting with us and be like, yeah, the bullshit I went through was fucked up. And I don't want to see future generations go through the same amount of turmoil and hell just to try and, make a life for themselves. It's why is it so hard for some people to just be like, I had shit, I didn't like what I experienced, and I want to make sure that we can move forward and make sure that nobody else, has to experience that shit. It's the same argument with these student loans. With some people who paid them off are like, yeah, girl, I paid off my loans, but I also want other people who are in debt to have their loans forgiven, because I wish I didn't have to go through that shit. There's some people who say that, but there are other people who paid off their loans and then look at other people who might possibly get their loans forgiven, and they'll be like, oh my goodness, this is so unfair, I can't believe that shit. So when are things gonna get better? Because if everybody has to go through the same hell that you went through, nothing will improve. This world will not change. I just wish that people could use the pain and bullshit that they went through as a motivator to be like, hey, that was disgusting. I want to make sure that the future generations who come after me don't have to deal with what I dealt with, instead of saying, oh, well, we bust our ass, we had a fucked up ass life, so y'all gonna have one too. That's so very destructive. That's so very destructive. So I want to end on this one, because I feel like some people think that when we have these conversations, we're saying that the older generation's problems don't matter, or that they didn't matter, or that they weren't or aren't serious. And that's not at all what we're saying. And I think it's so selfish to hear somebody say, hey, these are the things I'm struggling with, and be like, well, girl, what about me? What about me? Okay, well, make your own forum. Make your own forum, girl, or join us, girl. You see you see what I'm saying? So we're not saying that the older generation's problems don't matter, or that it weren't as serious or whatever. We're just saying that this generation, Gen Z, millennials, whatever, have to face things that are unique to the current times. Why is acknowledging that so hard for some people to do? I don't understand. That's the type of attitude that I just want to stay away from as I get older. You know what I mean? I do not want to have this spirit of bitterness about the things that happened, or the ugliness that I faced, the systems of trauma or oppression that I faced, the bullshit that I faced. And look in a young person's face and be like, oh, well, girl, you got to go through that shit too. No, nothing will ever change if we have that, like, well, if I got fucked up, I'm going to make sure everybody else is fucked up. Like that's so, it will hold all of humanity back. Like, I'm so serious. So yeah, tell me what y'all think about this. Love y'all so much. And make sure that you have a good goddamn evening. Holy worship me, yeah, you can blow me. I ain't the only